Okay, I gotta do the introduction, which always feels very artificial, and I hate it. I'm gonna do it for you. Okay, hi everybody. This is the Comedy Time Capsule, and today DNA is joining. Is joining me from Santa Cruz. Hello, DNA. How are you?
Very good, Nina G. Great to see you in your home, in your maybe kitchen with your Lenny Bruce picture.
Yes.
Lenny Bruce? No?
Yes. Yeah. Lenny Bruce, which has been up here forever. I bought it when I was like 23 in North Beach. There was a great poster shop there.
Yeah.
On the corner of Columbus and something else. So I've had it for a long time. It's just not for this. It just happens to be where I film.
No, you're a dyed-in-the-wool comic fan.
I am.
I know your story.
And my wall in back of you is like an Albert Brooks album, a Dick Gregory album, Mort Saul, who he signed it, Lily Tomlin. So yes, it's my whole kitchen is like hardcore comedy. So
Albert Brooks, because I saw him, I don't know, on Mike Douglas or Merv Griffin, or he was on a lot of shows, and he did that one ventriloquist bit where he has the dummy
dummy drink water,
and then the bit about writing a new anthem for America, where he's on the piano.
That's on this album.
One of the most genius. He was so good, and also on Twitter now, he's still great.
He is really good on Twitter. It's the first thing that I saw of him that I really loved was the Speak and Spell, where he'd ask the questions of and that's what got me. So, okay. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and anything you would like to plug?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm old, so I guess I'm not going to start back when I was born, because that's a lot of information. But I got into comedy, I guess about 15 years ago or something like that. And I knew I always wanted to do it. Like before my comedy career, I put on music festivals and concert series and citywide events, and worked with every kind of art form, from poetry to raves to dance, every kind of music and every band I worked with. And I hosted all those shows. I hosted like 3,000 shows, and I loved being funny on stage, but I didn't know that you could be a comedian. I didn't understand it. It seemed very secret to me. This was before the internet. So I just seemed like it was like a circus. Like, how do you join a circus? Like, you have to run away or something. And and I would see comedians. Notably, I saw, back growing up I'm all over the map, the linear map here. But in where I grew up in New Jersey, we had a comedy club called Rascals in West Orange, New Jersey. And it was kind of infamous because Eddie Murphy I saw there before he was on Saturday Night Live. I saw Stephen Wright before anyone knew who he was. And I saw Kevin Nealon. I saw all these people. But it was just like going to see hockey. Like, I can't be a hockey player. I mean, how do you become a professional something? I didn't get it. And even much later, when I was seeing comedians in the 90s, I still didn't get how you can be one. And so finally I moved to Santa Cruz about 15, 16 years ago, something like that, with the goal of being a comedian. And I thought I was coming out of a small town up in Northern California, where I kind of rose to the top of the town. And I was the big fish in a small town. And I'm like, when I moved to the Bay Area, I was like, I'm going to destroy the Bay Area. They've never seen this. And I did Ron's Farmhouse a lot. Remember that place?
That may have been right before my time.
It was before your time. So did Ron's Farmhouse. And I was super dirty. I was just dirt. I was just filthy. And I was doing really well in the first couple of months. and I was doing some shows in the city. The first show I did in the city was Mike Spiegelman's room in the Tenderloin. And that night I saw Marcella Arguella and Mike Winfield were there. And so I saw that there were people that were really good. I started to go, wait a minute, there's a huge pool of great talent. And then one night at Rom's farmhouse, I think Damon Ferguson was there. I blanked on stage, and I couldn't remember I couldn't remember. And I panicked. I melted down so hard, I stopped for 3 months and gave myself a good talking to, which was that I need to start at the bottom. I can't come in at the top. That's impossible. I need just to start all over again. And that's kind of when I started doing my first room, which I did a room right before the Blue Lagoon. And then I took over this room at the Blue Lagoon and did that, hosting for 13 years, and started comedy festivals and podcasts and web series and all of it. But I felt home. I felt like when I was doing all these music festivals and hanging out with bands, I didn't like, they'd be like, hey, let's hang out and jam. I was like, oh, I don't jam. I didn't have I like they were my friends, but we didn't really connect. But then once I got into the comedy scene, I just felt like this was my tribe. I was home. And so that's a little short synopsis.
Okay, and if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to because it's super personal. But were you in special ed as a kid? You have dyslexia, so let me just give that context.
Yeah, no, I know. All right, I got diagnosed with audio processing disorder 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And dyslexia is an attribute of it. It's one of the cool features of audio processing disorders, like dyslexia. But I never knew that. I never had a perspective. I never had a framework, a picture window to look through to understand why I was the way I was. Why when I feel overwhelmed emotionally, I stutter a lot, and I didn't know. Anyway, so growing up, I didn't know what was wrong with me. In kindergarten, I would say things backwards, and people would laugh at me. So rather than be, with people laughing, I was the person being laughed at. And so my coping mechanism starting in kindergarten was to stop talking. So then in first grade, which was the 70s, and speech therapy was in its infancy. Child psychology also was just kind of starting out. And so I was taken out of class every day for a speech therapy class that in the basement of my elementary school. It was like a World War II bunker with big reel-to-reel tape machines, and this color-coded system where they would make me read the card into a microphone and then listen to myself on headphones, which everyone knows you never want to listen to yourself. That's the worst thing that you can do to a little kid. My joke is that even Scientologists looked at what they were doing to me and was like, that's fucked up. Like, you shouldn't do that to a child. And they diagnosed me back then when in first grade that I had lazy lips.
Lazy lips? Really?
Yeah,
that's what they said?
Yeah. And it fucked with my head my whole life. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Lazy
that
lips.
Is the stupidest diagnosis I've ever heard of.
Right. So what was the question? Oh, was I in special ed? Yeah. So I guess I got taken out of class for this thing for like 2 years.
Okay. And the reason why I asked that was I was in special ed in terms of resource when I was in high school, where all these super smart, hyperactive, mostly men, boys were in there just causing a lot of nonsense because their intelligence wasn't being fed in some other way.
Yeah.
Then I went on to community college in Berkeley and then grad school, and I missed that. I missed that feeling in that classroom of the chaos, but also of the creativity too. And then when I got into comedy, it felt like I was coming back to that.
Yeah, I was a major disruptor in class. One of the cool little add-ons of audio processing disorder is modulation of voice, and so I was always too loud. I was always too loud. I still am. I still.
Well,
And the
you're
thing
from
is
New
when I
Jersey as well, so does that like?
well, like when I relax, which is rare, but when I'm like I'm not running a show, like I'm in between running a show usually, and I'm hanging out, with some comedians, and I'm like, moment for me. I always get shushed. At my own shows, I get shushed all the time that I'm too loud because I'm starting to be happy, and when I get happy, my voice gets louder, and so that followed me around. I got thrown out of class. I got thrown out of class all the time. Yeah, I was, and I wasn't but then, I found out, people said I was funny. And for a person who never felt part of something, another feature of audio processing disorder is I can't talk to more than one person at a time. When I'm talking to two people, my brain takes a step back and I can only listen. But I find it hard to interject and be a part of that. Another feature of audio processing disorder is in a situation where there's a lot of ambient sound, like a bar, a concert, a party. I can't discern words. And so all these things lead up to having a really shitty social life. So when people would tell me I was funny, I would try to, I'll be more funny. I'll be more disruptive, And sometimes, there was like one in particular was chemistry class. Mr. Wetzel, the weasel. Of course, you're Wetzel, you're going to be the weasel. And so he was doing, making molecular structures with balls and sticks. And I just stood up. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Hey, I didn't want to interrupt you while you're playing with your balls." Okay, 7th grade, that's the funniest thing anybody could say. And I just knew it. I couldn't not say it. I felt compelled. Once I found out that being funny was something that I could do, I felt compelled to do it. So, yeah.
No, okay. And so this is something that I've wondered about myself, and because we have a very similar dyslexia auditory processing thing,
Yeah.
super similar. It's interesting to me why comedy then, and why it's always appealed to me. Do you have any thoughts about how that goes together?
Yeah, I totally do. And there's different levels. There's different level, but the main thing is that when I'm on stage talking into a microphone, I'm controlling the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so since I'm controlling it, and because I've done it long enough, people can't interrupt me. I know how to work with any kind of interruption and turn it back into my favor. So I feel like I'm in control. And that feeling of control, I think, is what everybody wants. Everybody wants to feel like they're kind of in control of themselves, of in their body and of their speech. And so dominating a conversation, which is why I feel like I've tended to do things where I'm kind of the leader, because when you're the leader, people have to listen to you. So I'm the leader. I run the comedy festival. So when I'm talking to all these people, they're listening to me because I'm telling them something. And then all the side conversations, I don't really have to participate in because I'm still a part of what's going on. So I've figured out a workaround. And so comedy's the best. Even no microphone. I don't need a mic because of my voice modulation. I don't need a microphone. I can be loud if I need to.
And so this kind of leads me to the next thing that I really wanted to ask you about, because I interviewed Jorge Sanchez and I interviewed Jenny Sparks, who both created a culture within their communities for comedy in a somewhat deliberate way.
Yeah.
And you've done that same thing in Santa Cruz. And if you could talk about how you created that, if you were intentional about it or if it just happened,
yeah.
what was it?
Sure. I mean, the thing about comedy in Santa Cruz is that, and also I just want to say one more thing for the audio processing disorder is eye contact is hard. So even though Zoom is virtual, I will look away from the screen a lot. And also there's a window.
Well, and that's your thinking spot, right? That's your
I look
thinking
to my
spot.
left.
There?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the comedy scene in Santa Cruz was kind of my second go round, because when I lived in that Northern California town up in Chico, I created something up there that was very similar, which was this whole music and art scene. Now I came into Chico in '87 and I saw all this talent that was there. And so I just immediately got into organizing. And I got into organizing the talent and putting on shows. Some shows we would have 150 bands in one show. And that allowed the hippie band to hang out with the heavy metal band. And so I saw that I was just creating all these layers of community. And then I started a festival. It was like South by Southwest, but I called it Nowhere by Nowhere because it was in the middle of Chico in a rice town in the middle of nowhere. And we had 300 bands come from all over the country. And so then I saw, wow, I'm bringing in all these other people that are now building relationships with the people in our town. And I was just like, this can't be anything but good. And I did that for 19 years. And so when I moved to Santa Cruz, first of all, it just, cosmically or whatever, it's a very similar town to Chico. It's about 50,000 proper in Santa Cruz with a university with about the same amount of kids, and it's kind of progressive. And I found the same kind of enthusiasm in this town for my ideas, where people would be like, yeah, I want to support what you're doing. And so I originally started a room at the E3 Playhouse. And the E3 Playhouse, the three was entertainment, education, eatery. So that they did those three things. And their logo, I don't know how this looks, but it was an E. Does that look like an E? An E with a 1, 2, 3. There's a little E there. Anyway,
okay.
What they did in ASL, that means asshole. So they didn't know that. I just want to, I can't remember his name, but it was another part of the audio processing disorder is you can't remember lists. You can't remember sequential names or, oh my God, he had this joke about a paper fish, where he'd get a napkin and he'd make a fish out of it. Anyway, he was running the room. He didn't want to run it. So I took it over. And we did Kamau Bell, and we did, who else came down? A bunch of people came down, and I started now building a highway between San Francisco and Santa Cruz, because San Francisco was the hub. But I knew we were right on the route. I know we could hit LA. I know people going to Portland also could use this as a hub. And then I saw there was someone started another comedy room, but up until this point, there was zero comedy in Santa Cruz for at least 15 years. There had been someone in the 80s. Her name's Karen Babbitt, and she's on the wall at the Comedy Store. She's good friends with the Dice Man, and she's a big supporter. I didn't know who she was. She has an amazing story of her parents were in Auschwitz. And her dad worked for Disney, and I think designed Goofy. I might have that. Anyway, so she's got quite a history. And she had started a thing doing big comedy shows, but then just didn't have the producer, to be a producer, we can get into this. It's a whole neurosis you have to produce shows. And so I saw someone started a show at the Blue Lagoon. The Blue Lagoon, it's a sports bar, but it's obviously a gay, friendly, punk rock bar. But it says sports bar over the door, which I always thought was hilarious. And it's the best dive bar in the world. And this woman, Lindsay Blas, she started a comedy night there. Lindsay, you probably never worked with her. I think you started with me, but she, 5'1", She would wear stilettos, so she was like 5'5". She'd be on stage at the Blue hosting with a snake around her neck. She was tattooed from toes to face, and she suffered from, I don't know what the right terminology is, from grand mal seizures.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would have seizures on stage. And it was almost like I could smell it. I could smell in the room, the barometric pressure would change. And I'm like, she's gonna have a fucking seizure. Sometimes she would do the setup of a joke. She'd have a seizure. We'd catch her. We'd bring her off stage, revive her, put her back on stage, and she would deliver the punchline. It was the most anarchistic punk rock. Well, she burned out. She literally began to hate comedians and hate comedy and hate everything about it and wanted to set the whole place on fire. And I asked if I could take the room over, and I did. And then so I started, so that I did it every Thursday for 13 years. And that was and while I was doing that, I was trying to go into the city and the San Jose Improv and get on whatever, mic or showcase I can. I really wanted, like in Chico, when I was running all these music festivals, I was promoting other people. I always put other people first. And in comedy, I said to myself, I want to 50% promote everybody else and 50% promote myself. I wanted to be a comedian. I just didn't want to promote other people. So I started working at it and then also running shows. And when you run shows, people pay attention to you a little bit more because they want to do your show. And so, while the Bay Area was the hub, that at a certain point into doing the Blue Lagoon, like 5-6 years into it, the Bay Area had a slump and there weren't a lot of mics. And the Blue Lagoon became the place. It was the room to go to for several years. And it was me, Butch Escobar, who was originally there, Bedell Castillo, Ilio, Mean Dave before he was sober. Sean McKenzie would take the bus there every week from the city. And then the next wave was people like, there was Brendan Lynch was there. Then it started to be like Chad Opitz and Emily Catalano. So we had a solid run for 5 years. Phil Griffiths, where it was an open mic. And I had 23 comedians a night. And we would have all the locals go first. But that second half of the show, man, was amazing. And we were packed out the door for years. And all around, and then I just keep creating. So then I started doing the festivals. So I created a farm system in Santa Cruz, where if you were a local and you wanted to go on the Blue Lagoon, you had to come and help set up the tables. Because I think, and I believe it's so important if you're a performer to understand what that means from every part of what's happening, from the security guy at the door to the person behind the bar to who's working the sound. It's so important, I think, for people to realize they're part of something bigger than themselves. Sure, you just show up at a mic and you stroll in, la-di-da, you're the fucking king or queen or whatever you are. But you're part of a community. You're part of something bigger than yourself in comedy. There's no way you could do it by yourself unless you just stand on the street corner and yell at people, and that's what crazy people do. But if you want to be a comedian, you have to realize you're part of something bigger than yourself. And so anyway, because through all that, through the farm system, we became the Santa Cruz comedy scene became a community, and it was the same thing that I mentioned earlier. I would set it up, I would run it, I create the shows. And then when it was kind of like, more of the party aspect of it, I didn't really participate.
Why not? Just because that would kind of interfere with it, or you set it up and then let things happen?
It goes it goes all the way back to the audio processing and my entire upbringing. Parties are hard for me. Casual conversation's hard. I have to fight to do casual conversation. I've gotten better at it over the years. I think I'm better at it now than ever before. But yeah, it's, and also I'm old. I've always been like 10 years older than everyone I'm hanging out with, and now I'm like 30 years older, but, I'm like, anyway, but yeah. So, and now that's all gone, and that's all. And I don't know if it'll ever come back. And if it does, I'm sure it'll be different. I don't know what my place will be in it. I don't know if which one, I don't know. Where is it? I don't know if the Comedy Lab will resurrect. I'm like you, and I'm like everybody watching. I'm just full of question marks.
Okay, and we're going to get to more question marks, but can you talk about how you went from what you just talked about into the Comedy Lab, and how long that's been, and kind of why you are part of that, and what the intention was?
Mm-hmm. Right. So I was doing this weekly room for 13 years. And then I started rooms all over Santa Cruz County. And then I was running the Santa Cruz Comedy Festival and the Chico Comedy Festival. And then I joined the board of directors of Comedy Day in Golden Gate Park 10 years ago, and became more involved in that until the last 3 years. Santa Cruz shows up every morning at 7 a.m. and builds the whole stage. Like you, if it was comedy related, I wanted to do it. Oh, a web series. I want to make a web series. So we did that. A podcast, Chris Storen, your buddy, my friend, we did that for 45 episodes. Anything that was comedy. And before I answer your question, I do want to say one thing, which was, you were asking why, how did you build the community and why? And one thing that is, I don't think it's mystical, but it's just a genetic fact, is my great uncle and his brothers, they ran a hotel in the Borscht Belt called Hotel Anderson. And I'm named after Nachum. He's my namesake. And he booked the acts in the room at Hotel Anderson. And it's where Sid Caesar got when Sid Caesar did his first set and decided he wanted to be a comedian, it was at Hotel Anderson. And I know that because it's in his autobiography. And I just feel like there's something there. When people say it's in my blood, show business is in my blood, I really feel like it is. Because I started putting on shows before I ever knew any of that. I started putting on shows when I was 8 years old in the basement of my house in New Jersey. I have my nephews, Steve and Mike, would be my assistants, and I charge everybody $1 at the door, my family. If there was ever a family gathering for a religious or holiday or birthday, I put on a show every time. I got everybody, come on down, it's $1 to get in, come down to the basement, we're gonna have comedy, magic, little ventriloquism. And honest to God, I would make more money back then than I did at the Blue Lagoon. So my economic curve is downward. But
okay. I as a nerd, I have to ask you, because I'm looking up your uncle's place now. Yeah. Just like, and so he booked the talent there. Where was it in the Catskills?
So it was in a place called Monticello, New York, which was in the Borscht Belt.
And that was like the hardcore place, right? Like then there were like other areas, but that was like it was like the Niagara Falls area of.
Yeah, it was only like an hour outside New York City. So it was a lot closer to New York City than Niagara Falls is. But you hear of entertainment going on like the Chitlin circuit, which was like a southern route that mostly black performers used. The 1950s, there were still a lot of hotels that had no Jews allowed. So Jews had to create their own circuit to perform. And so the Borscht Belt were all these hotels, the Grossmans, I forgot the other big one, where there was these hotels where Jews would go from the Northeast. The Northeast is more densely populated than Japan. So when you had a hotel an hour outside New York City, you were pulling from New York City, Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Jews from all points beyond would come to the mountains, the Catskills of New York, and go to these lavish hotels. Now, the Hotel Anderson burned down. I talked to a guy one time who's a professor at Brown University who studies that culture, and he sent me a postcard that he had of the Hotel Anderson, which is like one of the few. Yeah, it looks familiar. It looks different though. Is that it? Does that say Hotel Anderson?
It says Hotel Anderson, Monticello.
Well, fuck, that's it. Yeah, that's
okay,
bigger than I remember. I guess they had like a casino, a horse stable, a pool,
Yeah,
but that was all gone way before me. And so the Jews, Mel Brooks was like, he was like what are they called? A tumbler. And like his role Mel Brooks would hang out at the pool and entertain the guests. So it was always about keeping the guests happy and entertaining them. So a lot of Jewish comedians came out of that whole area. That's where they developed.
And so that you're booking comedy in a mountain area, right? Like.
Yeah, I know. The Jew doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah.
But so similarly, when I was in Chico and I had created these festivals and musical events, I took over a theater up there. I took over this turn of the century vaudeville house, designed by Timothy Pfluger, who designed the Castro Theater and 100 other theaters in California predominantly. And this theater I took over in Chico, the Senator, had been abandoned for 30 years. And the owner thought it was a piece of shit. And I walked in, like I always walk in, with zero money, but big ideas. And he let me sign a lease. And we took over that theater and did 100 shows there. And that was my first go round with owning a theater. And so when I already had kind of like played everything out in Santa Cruz of what I could do here, I thought a brick and mortar would be the answer. I'd get my own club. And I, again, had no money. So, I found this guy, or he found me, who was a friend of my wife's friend. It was her husband. And he's one of those Tony Soprano kind of guys. He's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, you could do anything. What would you do? And I was like, I'd like to open a club. He's like, let's do it. And from that second on, for the next year, me and him just went place to place in Santa Cruz looking for a place to open a comedy club. We were in our old Radio Shack for 2 months, drew up plans, thought that was the place. And then, so there we go. This building behind me, the Riverfront Twin Movie Theater, I read had just gone out of business. They're the Riverfront Twin, 2 screens, one block. God damn it! One block that way is the Riverfront 9 in Santa Cruz. They have the 9 next to the 2. The 2's gonna lose. The 2 also got the shitty movies. I always believed that it was a higher like corporate like loophole, like. If the 2 loses money, we don't have to pay taxes on the 9. They seem to be some sort of and so the people that had been running that the Riverfront Twin, they stopped work. The popcorn machine had broke. They would run to the Riverfront 9 in the morning, get their popcorn, bring it over to the 2, and just throw it in the machine. And so when we got into that building, it needed a lot of work, and I do what I do. I do this thing. I'll just sign anything. I'll sign any document. You're like, you want the, I got involved in this bank loan. So the Tony Soprano guy and his wife have half of it, and me and my wife have the other half. And it's it was like $200,000, which is an inconceivable amount of money for me. But that's what we needed to get that club up and running. And I thought I'd make the money back one day and it wouldn't be a problem. Oh man. But yeah, so and so we were looking at Radio Shack and all these, and in my mind, I was thinking, 100 people, like kind of, I don't know. But then I started thinking, a club, we're having food and there's tables in front of the stage, and I'm walking around in a suit, like, hey, do you like your crab salad? I'm like, that's not me. That's not who. I'm not a club guy. I'm a theater guy. So I was like, this theater had 2 rooms. One's 160 seats. One is 300 seats. So it's like a Rooster Teeth Feathers and a Cobb's in one building, plus the lobby, which we also use for shows. And so in our first year, we did 288 shows. Yeah, I put my heart and soul into this building. I thought it was a good idea. The newspaper gave me the Entrepreneurial Leap of Faith Award. Can a small town keep a comedy club in business? And I really thought I was going to get to answer that question. The week we closed was our 1-year grand opening. We had our grand opening on the 1-year anniversary of being open at the beginning of March. And then we had our biggest weekend we ever had. We had Doug Benson sold out. We had Ian Harris, did very well. An old Santa Cruz comedian, Ian Harris. I don't know if you know him. And then on Sunday, we had Dave Nahil's the Real Irish Comedy Tour, which sold out. So our weekend, we had brought in more people than we'd ever brought in. And on Monday, I was reading the news about Italy and the coronavirus in Italy. And I immediately went to all my business partners and said, we need to close. I was like, I knew it. I'm like the rabbit Fiver in Watership Down. I knew something bad was coming. I saw it. It was so obvious to me. And Tony Soprano was very against it. Fuck that. We're not fucking closing. We'll never close. We need more week. I'm like, so it, and then because it was our 1-year anniversary, we were on the front page of all the papers. And then the next day I was on the front page of the papers again, because I was saying that I'm going to close. We were the first entertainment venue. We were the first venue in town to close. They're like, you're ahead of the curve. And it's like, that's cool. But like being the first one in front of a worldwide pandemic, it doesn't really play out as something positive.
To say that the world's ending when the world's going to end.
You were the first guy to know the world's ending. How's that feel?
And so with all of that, like, what's it like to run a business from that? And I know you've gone online, like, just say more about like life after that.
Since we've closed? Right. Well, I want to just go back to one of your earlier question about why a brick and mortar building? Why, with all the headaches that comes with it? I mean, do I really enjoy the shows, or am I busy plunging the toilets and dealing with the broken popcorn machine and the person who passes out and my employee is drunk? And is it fun? It's not that fun, but it gives me ultimate control. It goes back into a need to be in control. And so with having my own business, I controlled every aspect of it. And then we closed. And because of my genetic history or my, messed up wiring and disposition, I got to keep doing shows. So we immediately started doing virtual shows. I'm not going to say we're the first.
Yeah, you guys were like the first ones, because I bought a ticket even to support you for the Eddie Pepitone show.
Yeah.
And that was the first major one, right?
Like Eddie was a big name, but we had done Dave Ross and Caitlin Gill and all the people that I had at the lab. And now next Saturday, I'm having my first virtual comic, who's someone who I always wanted to get to the lab but couldn't, which is Carmen Lynch. I love Carmen Lynch. She is fantastic. So we immediately started Zoom. And I'll tell you, 100% honesty, I didn't want to do it. I didn't like Zoom. I don't like the virtual. It's anti everything I believe. My thing is like live performance, bringing community together, the power, the cathartic power that can happen at a comedy show. Someone's whole dominant, view of the world can change. Anything, the magic, the anarchy sometimes at a comedy show, the Marx Brothers zaniness of things you don't expect, none of that in Zoom. And so my wife, Jessica, she was like, you have to do this. And I think she was trying to pull me out of a fucking hole. And she's like, you got to get on the screen. And we do it. And we've done it. I believe this is our eighth week doing the show. We do 4 shows a week. Wednesday's an open mic, Blind Tiger, which I have some new people, but mostly I pre-book it because I don't want it to be terrible. Thursday, storytelling. I started storytelling. Again, these are shows we did at the lab when we were open. The storytelling's amazing because, you should meet her. Lara, when I joined up with 2 women who helped me run it. One is the director of KZSC, the college radio station. And if you're watching this, you want to hear some good music, just tell Alexa KZSC. And the other woman was this woman. She came to Blind Tiger and did comedy. And I was like, holy shit, she's a great storyteller. I'm like, you got to do our storytelling. And then I found out that she owns the biggest nonfiction, which is literary agency in America. And she is the ghostwriter for the Dalai Lama. Yeah. And she was the ghostwriter for Stephen Hawking's. She's had 5 books on the New York Times bestseller list. And so, and she's fantastic. You'd love her. But so Lara joined our group. So now we do that on Thursdays. We do sloth storytelling. It's different. This doesn't have to be comedy. And then on the weekends I do, like I did at the lab, like most comedy clubs have the same headliner, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I wanted somebody different on Friday, somebody different on Saturday. I want it to be like a microbrewery where we had this special thing on tap, one night only. And if you come, you get to drink it. And if you don't, you have to wait. That was my model. And so every Zoom show I've done for the last 8 weeks, I fucking hate. I don't like them. I don't feel good about them. When it's over, like when this is over with you and I, when we push end meeting, there's no worse feeling. The end meeting to the pit of my stomach, it just makes me ill because I'm just like, it's just a reminder.
Why? Like, because there's so many parts, there's so many things to hate about this. Why do you hate this?
It's so abrupt, I mean, as much as I don't necessarily like the party part of comedy, I do like the hang. I do like hanging out, especially with people I'm comfortable with. So if I'm with you or Dave, or, Phil Griffiths or Ben Dell or, Butch or Chris, those my friends, after a show, I love that. I laugh so hard. I get to let my hair down and I'm not running the show anymore and I get to hang with my friends. And I know it's only going to be for 30 minutes, which makes me very comfortable. Like I know how long it's going to last. And then it's my club, so I could throw them out anyway. And I love that. And the end of a Zoom, there's nothing sadder than the end of a Zoom, man. It's like when you're having a really good dream and then you wake up and then you're like, oh, fuck. That's what it's like with Zoom. That's one of the things. And then, the tech, the pushing the buttons and, I got to spotlight people. It's stressful. Going back to being a producer, the hat you have to wear for a producer is totally different than the hat you wear for a performer. And so running the show is stressful, but I don't know. I guess I'm getting better at it. Maybe, maybe not.
And so let's see. There's a lot that I want to ask you about. But it's the first thing that kind of sticks in my head is that you said that you think that a comedian should do a little bit of everything in comedy, to set up the stage, to lighting people, to doing all of that stuff.
Yeah.
How does that translate into how you're doing shows now?
Right. Well, I wish running Zoom shows was as easy as moving chairs. There's always some glitch. The aforementioned Jessica, the queen of the lab, she runs tech. She doesn't run tech, but she puts out fires during my Zoom shows. This is something that I think most people who run Zoom shows don't do, because we always get emails from people. I can't get in. I don't know how to get in. My password's not working. And I would imagine most people who are running Zoom shows, they don't deal with any of that. It's the person on the screen and maybe their buddy who are running the show, and nobody's handling problems with customers, basically. And so she handles all the customer problems, and there's always problems with Zoom. No show's perfect, I guess. And then I'll tell you one really weird thing, and I've just only been thinking of this the last 2 days, is when I started the lab, it was so hard to get ahead. I was in week to week. I was drowning, basically. I'm like booking this week's shows. I'm like booking next week's shows, but I'm still trying to advertise. I'm trying to advertise tonight. I haven't even gotten to I haven't built the tickets for next week yet. I need to book the rest of the month. And that's just one small sliver of like the running a venue, beside everything else, employees and taxes and lawyers and accountants, all just like booking your calendar. I was drowning, but then I got ahead. And I got ahead by several months, and I had the next 2 months of the club booked. Well, when that all fell apart, now here I am in virtual land. I am back. For my shows next week, I haven't built the tickets. I haven't built the Facebook. I haven't done the Talkify. I haven't done the website. I still feel like I'm back to where I started. And I think that's not uncommon. I think a lot of people in quarantine are feeling the exact same thing. We're all kind of back to where we started before we got into whatever it was, comedy.
Yeah. And is that getting back to where you started? How does that apply to the performance part too?
Well, God, I mean, it's so different. And I'm trying now 8 weeks in. I mean, one funny thing is like I'm doing 4 shows a week. I might be doing more comedy than 90% of comedians that are out there. And I've really developed this quarantine persona that I use when I perform now. And I'm doing personally, like I said about that 50% putting on the show, 50%, I'm still trying to be a better comedian. So that's kind of gratifying. But one thing I've been trying not to do, which I had been doing earlier as a host, which I would be like leaning into the audience and being like, guys, I just want you to know that, stand-up comedy this isn't stand-up comedy. Okay. These people are funny, but like, it's so different now because they're in their home, they're sitting down. I'm saying it's not comedy. And I just was like, dig a hole. And then I introduced somebody, and like, I did it to Hayden Grief Neal the other night, and Hayden goes, I've never been introduced before by a host saying, this guy is funny, but he may not be now. So here, so I'm trying to take the deep breath and go, this is where we're at. This is the new format, and this is what we have. And but not to have verbalize that. Everyone's trying their best, guys. I did the Puderbaugh sisters last night. They did it from inside their inflatable pool. Like, I think comedians are stretched. So like I said, we're all back to where we started. We're in our home. There's no shows. And we're writing funny things down. We have no one to perform them to. And then now we have a Zoom thing. And it's like, how do you tell a joke into a vacuum? And how do you want to do your set? have you done this before where you're like going through like what's in my set works for this time and place that we're in right now? And I have seen, I really love Samantha Gilwhite has been doing this character, Babette Muffins. I love that comedians are doing characters. I love that Caitlin Gill just took a En Vogue song and dissected it for 20 minutes because she said she could never do it on stage because it was too long form, but it really worked for Zoom because she could show the video. So Dave Ross also did a thing with a screensaver where he did like 20 minutes on a screen. So I think it's turning on a different part of comedians' brains right now of how do I adapt, like, you know, evolve or perish.
Mm-hmm.
Or take a break, wait it out, do other things, learn French, learn how to play the piano. You know, I don't know, you know, just do nothing, just start smoking. I don't know, but like, you know, but I want to stay in it. It's not, I don't have a goal. I'm not saying, Nina, when this ends in a month, I don't know if it's a month, it might be a year. I really don't know. So I'm just trying to relax into this medium and see what we could do that's fun.
For you and for the comedians that you work with, that interaction with the audience seems to like what I'm seeing is people who never cared about the audience in the first place and were more performative and self-centered are probably doing great with this because they don't care what the audience thinks anyway. And also I was talking to someone else who was like, I've bombed enough to know that I just need to go through it, and that bombing has helped me be a better comic on Zoom because that's just what you do now is just go through it, and it doesn't matter if people will laugh or not. What are some of your observations of that relationship with the audience that is now a relationship with an avatar?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have always been, here's the thing. I like what I like. When I like a comedian, when I like someone's comedy, I like it and I love it and I champion it. And when I don't like someone's comedy, I keep it to my fucking self. But I am one of the most skeptical people when yeah, I know I can hear my inner Mean Dave right now. I'm one of the most skeptical people where when people are telling me they're doing well on Zoom, I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. I like to see that because for 8 weeks I've been doing it. The open mic, Blind Tiger on Wednesdays, we usually have like 8. You know, a regular open mic is 23. I've seen some people try to do open mics with 23 comedians, 30 people. I'm like, why? Anyway, so not everyone can do it. People are getting better. Like I said, I think comedians are evolving. I think this is a really hard time. Imagine how hard it'll be if you start as a Zoom comic, right? There's people just starting now as a Zoom comedian. How's that going to translate when you get back into, who knows? I mean, that's one thing I love about the art form is that there's no age requirement. Anybody can do it. You just have to be funny and smart enough to evolve to it, to the whatever is in front of, you know, to work off of. Some people call it riffing. I think it's evolving. I think it's just making you a more rounded person. And even like my earlier thing of learn who your wait staff is, learn what it's like to put on a show, learn all these things. It's like a Renaissance person. Someone who understands all the aspects of the art form that they're in, I think makes them a more rounded, better performer. But like I said, I've noticed, I did a show of John Alkabee's recently, and John used like a PowerPoint kind of thing to use. Is he a prop comedian now? Does that matter? Like these things that we held people to, it's like the pure art form of the art of comedy. A microphone, don't use facial expressions, don't change the intonation, don't do voices, just you do your jokes, and if they laugh, you're a real comedian. Really, in Zoom, is that who wants to do their set? I have seen There's a guy, Zach Vile. I don't know if you know him. He was a Santa Cruz comedian, moved to LA. Again, he's in his fucking bedroom. He's in his bed. He's laying in his bed doing his set. I mean, is it just me, or is that just seems super strange? But that's where we're at. And he did jokes, and they were really good. I think that you don't have to do quarantine. You could do anything. That's, again, the beauty of comedy. You could do anything. Let's see what works. Mm-hmm. Now, I've watched other shows where they allow the audience to either have their mic on or allow their image to be around the screen so you can see everyone that's watching. And I've also heard all the horror stories of the people who got Zoom bombed. Yeah. And I can't handle that. I'm not saying like I have a brand and I don't want to, I just don't want to deal. That would feel so bad.
Back to control.
Yeah, it goes back to control. So I don't allow our audience to have their mic or video on, but they can interact in the chat room. So through the chat room, that's how the comedians performing can see, and it works. They can read the comments, they respond. I think it's a magical thing to all of a sudden be watching a performer and have them talking to you. I think that's like what I offer with these comedy shows. It's comedy, but it's a level of intimacy. It's like you can buy the master class with Judd Apatow. I bought the master class with Steve Martin. So did you, right? Did you buy the Steve Martin? Yeah. I haven't even made it. I've had it for a year. I haven't made it all the way through. I should revisit that. But you can't.
We started working with a woman who had been in comedy like a week. I was like, "Fuck this." So that's when I turned it off.
It was neat. It was like your Uncle Steve, and you feel like you're part of the circle, but you're not. And with these Zoom shows, you are part of the circle. You are in the show. I see people in our chat room like try to heckle or try to burn the comedian, or it's a different level of interaction. But I think it works fine, and that's the one I'm most comfortable in. Mm-hmm. And some comics can't handle the silence, but it's just like, hey, that's what I offer.
No, and this is as good as it's going to get right now. And that is the thing, is talking to some comics. Some have questioned, can this even be comedy? Which is a whole other thing. Others have said that I think their unwillingness to do online shows is in part because they're in denial of what's going on. I think they're grieving stand-up comedy, and that first step of denial has kept them from growing and engaging and creating, and now they're like, fuck, now I have to do it.
Yeah. Well, again, I think, I said this thing, I go, it was Earth Day, whatever, a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, this is the year Mother Gaia is mad at us and sent everybody to their room to think about what we've done. And that's what sure, you can stay medicated the whole time, but this is the time to think about who we are. Who are you? Who are you without the things that, like, I'm a comedian. Okay, well, if you're not a comedian, who are you? Well, it's like I'm a bartender. Well, no, you're not, because that restaurant's closed. So who are you? I think we have the time to think about it, And so
what you're saying is a comedian then has to ask, who am I without live stand-up?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a lot.
It is a lot. And then also why? So like we kind of covered, and I think like someone like, again, I know your story, like you saw stand-up comedy when you were a kid and you're like, this is it. I don't know you knew you wanted to get into it. I never knew I wanted to get into it. I was like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters, where I would draw Harpo Marx all the time. I would do put on shows, but I didn't consciously go, oh, I want to do this forever as a living, as a performer. But my path went that kind of blindly, my path led that way. You know, I was talking to Clay Newman the other day, who also would probably be a great person to talk to. And he's like, yeah, DNA. Hey, DNA, whatever. He's got that voice. He's like, hey, he goes, well, probably like you know, I was the class clown and super popular. And so I was so popular and a clown. That's why I got into comedy. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I think it's so interesting how we all find our thing into comedy. But I think if you're a kind of comic who is shallow in their passion, who fell into comedy, who maybe was a misanthrope and went to the Blue Lagoon and was like, I want to be part of this scene. I want to, you know, they were attracted to it like a moth to a flame. And now that it's not there, the social thing's not there, the party after's not there, the free beer and the alcohol's not there, the serotonin hit from that joke that you told. You don't even hear the silence from the other 30 jokes. Now you don't have that, and you miss it, and you're shitting on Zoom. Zoom's not real. Zoom's not comedy. That says more about you than it does about Zoom and comedy.
How do you think comedy performance is going to change after all this, especially being someone who owns a club?
I won't say that I think a lot about it, because I try not to think about things that will make me extremely depressed. Okay. Kind of that garbage in, garbage out. Like I watch the news. I'm a news junkie, but I also listen to Gavin Newsom at noon because he's very soothing, and it's nice to hear somebody that can make complete sentences. I think about, okay, I look at the mandates and I look at, like, you know, whatever, nail salons are going to open and barbershops are going to open, restaurants, retail can do curbside delivery, movie theaters, which I guess we've kind of fallen to that, although we're live entertainment, are in Gavin Newsom's phase 3. So maybe that's July. Let's say it's August. So let's say in a couple of months, I can hold on to this building with the bills and the rent and still manage to have it there for us in July when we open. Well, I look at the model of that comedy club that's open in Salt Lake City right now, and they do, like, I don't know, infrared scanning, and then they take your temperature, and then everyone's 6 feet apart, and then the staff's all gloved and masked. And that's not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up for this Mad Max fucking comedy show. And then, okay, but we're going to do it. So then we open the doors. Who's coming? Who is going to come inside an enclosure? One of the things about the COVID, is all about particles. The particles that come out of your fucking mouth, and how they spread and where they go and how long the virus exists outside an infected person's body. And where do you spit out particles more than the comedy show? You're guffawing, you're chortling, you're spitting everywhere. I don't see it. I'm not saying there won't be comedy. I think maybe an outdoor comedy show, you know, all different variations of doing shows, but inside a facility, I don't know. I don't, maybe we'll get maybe bam, fucking South Korea has a vaccine tomorrow. You know,
they do have their shit together more than we do.
Right. Elon Musk, all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I've had it for 2 months, but I'll share it with the public now. You know, I mean, sure, short of some sort of miraculous cure, I don't know how comedy, I'm going to cry. I don't know how comedy will survive.
Do you think our sensibilities around humor will change? Because the way that I'm looking at this is we're such a young art form. If we go back to Lenny Bruce as the real stand-up comedy, you having a connection to the Borscht Belt, you may disagree that it was even earlier, but relatively young, we haven't even really been through this Spanish flu, much less, it's a Black Plague and all of that. And the Black Plague, from that came the Renaissance. Do you
Right.
think that there will be, and that's what Jorge Sanchez said. That's not me.
Right.
But do you think that we'll have a change in humor, or a change in comedy because of this, both with the comics, but with but the general world too?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is as insulated as all of us comedians have believed our community to be, we're all being affected. It's this pandemic, this reality is fucking with all of our heads, and is, that whole thing of like, you need a little sand in an oyster to make the pearl. It needs to be irritated in order to make this beautiful thing. Well, we're all irritated. I mean, sure, yeah, we're going to change. We're all going to change. Like I said about that, if evolve or perish. Community or chaos. As Buckminster Fuller always said, that are we going to come together or are we going to fall apart? And I believe with all my heart we're going to come together and be a community, and I think comedies can still lead the way. And when I got really sad a couple seconds ago, it was more because I don't see how the lab can survive. I don't in my head right today, May 9th, 2020, 2:08 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I don't, in my mind, maybe I'm not creative enough, but I can't envision how it opens and succeeds. That said, one of my dreams before all the lab and even like, I think it was in my first 2 years of doing comedy and meeting Kellen Erskine and Moshe Kasher and Weinbach, and seeing all these people from the Bay Area who I thought were geniuses. And I had this idea way early in my career, and I even reached out to Moshe, and I know Kellen, that's why I mentioned both of them. And my idea was, I said, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to rent a school bus, and fill it with comedians, and we just do a tour across America, like a whole, 40, 50 of us. And I still would love to do that. I think that's a dream of mine. I would love to fill a school bus or two, because I would like my own school bus, so I didn't have to hang out with all of you in your school bus. I would have a short school bus, which was my private crib school bus. And I also like to drive, so I would drive it. But I'd also have like a nicer one that like all the comics can stay. And then we would just hit downtrodden towns, which at this point is every fucking town in America. And we build the stage and we put on a show, and then we get on the bus and we get the fuck out, like the Blues Brothers, like a mission from God kind of comedy tour. I would still love to do that. So I'm not out of ideas. I just think, like you, like every comedian, and like everybody watching, we're all going to change in some way and form. And the things that we held on to that we thought defined who we were, like a snake sheds its skin, we're all going to come at this a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask?
No, I just wanted to say, I for listeners who are watching, who may wonder about me and Nina G, is that Nina, I maybe have it wrong, but I think one of the first times we met was probably at the Blue Lagoon.
Probably.
And I became a fan immediately, and then I'm sure we did shows other places. And then when Nina wrote her book, I got so excited because I knew it was a vehicle that could help her get her an important message and voice heard to a much bigger audience. And so anyway, I've been a fan for a long time. And so thanks for having me on Comedy Time Capsule.
Well, thank you for doing this. And for me, the way that I'm engaging in comedy is I am intellectualizing it. And this is the best that I could do right now, because it's that same thing of seeing who you are without live comedy. And I think that is the thing, like that is an existential question that came out of this. And I really appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness, and also all the support you've always given everybody. I mean, from San Francisco Comedy Day to festivals. I did your festival way back when I was like 3 years in, and I really appreciated doing that. So just love what you do and what you bring to the community. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
All
Bye,
right.
guys.
Okay, bye for real now.